having a panel discussion centered around the current realities and the fundamental principles in practice. But before we go on, I'd like you all to know that we have 45 minutes, and since we're ethical accountants, we're going to stick to time. So each panelist will have 10 minutes, and we'll leave 15 minutes for our audience to ask their questions. So we're going to talk about what's happening, and we want to have your view. So you have 10 minutes. So the first person I'll be calling is Mr. Godwin. Please, 10 minutes. Tell us your view on what's happening with our profession.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. From the paper delivered by the professor, that was, I think he explains all the essence of ethics. As to what is currently happening, one would tie it to, like the last threat I mentioned, the issue of survivor. People tend to give a reason why they cannot comply with ethics. And they tie it to a hardship. Even for professional accountants, we have professional accountants in public sector. We have professional accountants in business. We have professional accountants in practice. Those various professions have their own peculiar traits. Peculiar when it comes to the where I belong to, where I practice in those in practice. The trait those in practice have is what one of the questions that was asked, that you want to bid for a job. How do you mitigate self-interest? In the country today, everybody believes that without knowing somebody, you can't get the job. And even if with that situation, you could still work with ethical standards and ensure that the threat is within a manageable level. For instance, if you want to, if the top management in an organization is your relative and your firm is to handle it, at that point you already know that there's a threat. There's no second thought about it. But do you have enough structure to mitigate that kind of threat? Some of the provisions made by every firm is to ensure that when you are setting up if you eventually get the job, when you are setting up the team, you ensure that every person that has a party to that relationship is moved out of that team. And when it comes to taking decisions, you just put yourself out of it. Rumors will always come, but what a professional looks at is, like the professor presented, he summarized all the principles with three principles: honesty, independence, and competence. If you are not honest, you are bound to give subjective opinion that will not be acceptable. If you are not independent, even if you give the most objective answer or judgment, so now that independence is not there, the public is expected to doubt your integrity. And competence, if you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the skill, you don't have the training, you can't do anything. So in summary, we'll say whatever decision you take, is assume that you already have the skills, you have the competence, you have the knowledge, you've been able to work around interest, self-interest, self-advocacy, familiarity, you work around those things. The guiding principle is that, are you working in the public interest? I see that as the focus. Whatever decision you make, whatever judgment you arrive at, side by side with another professional who has the same set of information, it's expected that you have the utmost competence. Issue of I have a lower competence than the person coming does not arise. As a professional, you have the same competence. With the second opinion align with your own opinion based on all parameters. If it's yes, you are fine. The moment it's no, there's a K-leg, there's a problem there. So that is the way I will summarize the issue of contending with the threats we have as professionals. For the one angle I will want to recommend to the institutes, especially with respect to threat to those in practice, is that we have this bandwagon effect that if you are not from the big four, you don't know anything. That belief is there. And when you come out of that angle, you are in practice. If you are not, you bid for a job, if you are not in the big four, there is a general perception that you cannot be competent. You cannot be objective. If you are subjected to pressure, those threats come around you, you can't withstand it. That general belief is there. Unfortunately, the members of the profession who are in these organizations also promote it. Then it becomes a problem. I'll give a personal experience. I won't mention the organization. We bid for a job with the Big Four. I had the assessment stage by stage. We were coming top. Even got to the point, it's okay, the fee you quoted is half the fee quoted by the others. But just the K leg is that you are not the Big Four. And we can't afford to have our opinion that is not coming from the Big Four. That was a threat officer. So how do you deal with that threat? The institute need to come into play. And for those in public sector, where you have professionals facing the threats, and is trying to maintain its integrity by all standards, reporting to those in authority, at the end of the day, he still found himself on the wrong side of those making the policies. What does the institute do to ensure that the interests of these members are not compromised? Because if that is where the issue of survivor comes in. If I know that when I comply with all professional ethics and standards, there are no safeguards for me, even from the angle of the institute, there's a big issue. So the institute need to look at that angle, and also in terms of growing competence, or that general conception that if you are not from that Big Four, you are not there. The Financial Reporting Council came up with a standard code of ethics some time ago, some years ago, tried to say, okay, to build the competence in the profession, where you have the Big Four, can you have a joint audit take with the small firm, so that this competence you think that doesn't exist, that only is in the domain of that four, it doesn't exist anywhere. Can you build up that competence from the base? But what happens? I won't say it's the Big Four that run down that policy. I don't know how it came about, so that I don't make a conclusion. But when such policy was coming up, I personally took interest in it, and I was looking forward to it, but it just died down naturally. So the institute has a lot to do. In the Western world, the threat that professionals face in our environment is not as tough as the threat faced in the Western world, because there are structures, there are where you try to maintain your professional ethics, and somebody is trying to push you off. You have safeguard here and there, but I'm not sure the safeguard we have in the country is robust enough to mitigate the threats we have in the country. Surviving the professionals who still keep on to their ethics at all costs.
I also believe that most times, it's also because of poor or inadequate ethics training. Because based on the little survey we did, if you registered for this conference, you see that we had a question: have you attended any ethical training have you ever attended, or have you attended in the last 2 years, or in the last 3 months? So from that, we saw that almost 60% of the people that registered, that's like 190 something people, almost 60% of them have not attended an ethics training in the last 2 years. And of that 60%, 40% has never attended an ethics training ever in their career. So that's a very big deal. And most people that registered for this conference are qualified accountants. They belong to different professional association organizations. So that's a very big challenge, because if you don't know what is expected of you as a professional accountant, so how are you going to do your work? And ethics is so important. That's what makes us a profession, because one of the things that makes a profession is that you have a code that you adhere to. You have an ethical code that guides your practice. So if you don't know anything about that code, how are you going to perform your duties as a professional? So that's my view of what is happening. The rampant accounting scandals we are having now. That's my view of what is going on in the profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Obichukwu, for your insights. I hear her very well. She said, in spite of this safeguard we have in those developed countries, we still have scandals happening in these same big fours. I mean, we have the Australia one, the scandal, we had the one in the UK. So based on that, it upholds us as personal, as accountants to personally be responsible for those ethics. If you notice, the ethics is principle based. So you might not always have all the guidelines, like she said. You will not always have it. So it's based on you now to take responsibility. And I also hear her say we can never underemphasize training, these ethical trainings. We need to always bring it up. So as organizations, we need to have this constant training, engaging and re-engaging. And one of the organizations I know that is big on this ethics is UGN. They are very big on ethical training. I mean, train your staff, train your people. You can never, I mean, when it's always in your face, they will know what to expect. So without delaying, is our third panelist ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Eddie, over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Before I begin, I would like to recognize the distinguished Professor Ofebu. It may interest you to know that she was also my lecturer over 20 years ago at University of Nigeria. Professor, thanks a lot for the wonderful keynote. As brilliant, as on point as ever. Thanks for your submissions as well.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to begin my talk really about the role of the accountant. Not very glamorous, typically behind the scene, considered support function, and often underestimated. However, the accountant is one of the key players in the financial system that gives stakeholders, confidence in the system. Without the work of the accountants, stakeholders and customers of businesses will lack the trust in products and services they provide. Now, the reason why I want to start here is for us to understand and appreciate the role the accountants play. It's at the center of the need for us to take this conversation seriously. So as I say this, so if you're an accountant here, if you've ever felt unseen and if you've ever felt underappreciated, this is my little tap on your back to say you are doing well. I see you, all right? And to drive home my point, when you think about it, a lot of these frauds that we've talked about that have been committed all over the world could have been detected and prevented by an accountant, okay? And the impacts are usually far-reaching. So if you think about the subprime recession that happened between 2008 and 2010, these happened because accountants didn't play their role, resulting in loss of jobs and eventually loss of lives. Oftentimes, when you think about some of these things, it kind of feels like it's just paperwork, it's just computer that we are all working. But at the end of the day, the impact of what we're doing affects people's lives, and if you want to drag it to the extreme, people lose their lives really. And there's actually research to support what I'm talking about. So I was reading up an article about the spike in the economic suicides that happened during the recession. And the research that was done by University of Oxford found that there was a dramatic spike during that period. And they looked at what we had, what was happening before the recession and what happened during that period. And during that 2-3 year period of the recession, there was about 10,000 more what is called economic suicide committed by people in the US, Europe, and Canada. So the reason why I want to start with this is to kind of remind us of the importance of the job that we do, because oftentimes it feels like it's not as important. It's just paper that we are really doing. And so this is at the center of the need for us to take these things seriously. And I know Godwin, you talked about, safeguards, and Obichukwu talked about safeguards, and, in different cultures, in different environments, there are more established structures, obviously in developed Western worlds. For instance, in the US, the whistleblowing system works really very well. So if as an accountant, you find yourself in a difficult situation where you really need to report a situation, there are channels to do that. Even in Nigeria, those things exist, but I don't know how much of that we actually do. So at the end of the day, it comes down to us taking responsibility and taking our job seriously. All right. So when you think about the principles that the professor has spent a lot of time to kind of talk about, a lot of the focus of that is on the accountants. You have to take responsibility for the job that you do, to ensure that you have integrity, to ensure that you're objective in your dealings, you do not compromise, to ensure that you are competent. So you make sure you do your CPEs. Oftentimes, there are CPE requirements to maintain your professional certification, but people find ways around it. So you need to realize that these things are actually very important for us to strengthen our resolve to do our jobs. And also, there's a sixth principle that never really happened. It's the sixth principle that was considered by the committee, but it ended up they kind of left it behind. But the sixth principle that the committee considered when they were thinking about the five principles was what was called moral courage. Now, moral courage is talking more about the fortitude and determination to ensure that you do not compromise. And in this is what I'll consider really, really important in today's world, to ensure that accountants are determined to ensure that they do not bend, they do not compromise, they do not yield, despite the fact that the safeguards may not be as strong as you would want them to be. If it means resigning a job, if it means resigning an offer, or removing yourself from that situation, that's what needs to be done. So I'll end here, but this is my beginning comments, and thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you so much, Eddie, for your. From what I hear, individuals must take responsibility as an accountant, to be serious in whatever you're doing, and you must respect the ethics and have moral courage, which never really happen. But underneath it, you don't need to be told, because when you're faced with a situation with someone bigger than you telling you you have to do this. It's that moral courage that will make you say, no, I want to do it. So thank you so much. Before I hand over the mic back to Obichukwu, please, we would like to take questions at this reacting. I don't think you can hear us. Okay. So I'll ask
So are you
Obichukwu.
talking to me?
Yes, please. Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I didn't
Okay,
realize you were
so I
talking
have
to
a
me.
question for you.
Okay.
So what will you say? Will you say that the fundamental principles is still relevant in this era where we have artificial intelligence? Will you say it's relevant, this our basic principle of objectivity, integrity, professional competence and due care, especially professional competence, because we are, as accountants, some of us are still trying to understand the AI world. So will you say these principles are still relevant?
The short answer to that is yes. It's relevant today. It's relevant tomorrow, and it would. I don't see the relevance to be diminished or extinguished by the growth or introduction of artificial intelligence. I think the thing is that we need to realize that artificial intelligence, there are certain things that it can do and certain things it cannot do. It has limitations. But then we do not know what is going to be tomorrow. But when we talk about AI, we're talking about the AI that we know today. But of course, there are endless possibilities in AI, machine learning, and all that. But then at the end of the day, it's AI relies on very complex data modeling. It relies on a lot of what is being fed into the supercomputers that work together to really do what is called the AI. And at the end of the day, they actually need accountants to be able to feed the right information to these supercomputers, really. So if you think about it, whether it comes to doing the job itself, which in my view, probably things like data entry that maybe accountants could do, some of those things probably can diminish with AI. Some of those things, AI could take away a lot of those kind of opportunities and jobs as well. However, when it comes down to the principles itself, it would continue to be relevant. It will be relevant, in terms of ensuring that the AI also complies within that framework. So we need to remember that the principles really is what governs our conduct as accountants. So even if there is room, opportunity for AI to perform accounting functions, it needs to also function within that framework. So in terms of relevance, it will continue to be relevant. There's another side of the conversation, really. Of course, if AI obviously would take away a lot of accounting jobs that humans actually perform now, it's quite likely that some jobs could go. But at the end of the day, humans will still take the lead in terms of using judgment. Artificial intelligence may not be able to exercise those kind of judgments as good as humans would do. So there are limitations, really, at the end of the day, to what AI can do. I guess all of us are still kind of learning about AI, and we know that there are a lot of possibilities in the future, and we'll get to find out as time goes on.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Thank you.
Add something, to me, our experience in this part of the world is neglecting what the International Ethical Standards Board stated. We must understand that we are working in the public interest. And once you don't have that in mind, you cannot obey these principles. Placing yourself before the public you are supposed to represent, the public you are supposed to serve, If you look at self-interest, financial interest, myself, I want to benefit. And you forget about the fact that the public is interested in what you are going to give out. The public's value you have to provide. You neglect it and you are thinking about yourself. Once that is there, it overrides every other thing. You cannot, what is integrity? Because you want to get something for yourself. All others, even if you are talking about, professional behavior, by that time you have relinquished it. You will.
Thank you. From what I'm hearing, is there a safeguard against survivor threats? And the person I would like to answer this is Mr. Osagie. Please, we need your insight on this question.
I would say yes. The first thing is determination. You see, why the ethical standard is being reviewed over and over from time to time is that humans try to take advantage of any loophole. So when somebody wants to make a mistake or intentional mistake, he's looking for a loophole in the standard to justify it. So the excuse of survivor threat, that is why I did not I decided to compromise, is still part of those excuses. So a professional doesn't look for reason why I should not why I should fail. No professional does that. Professional looks for reason why I should maintain my standard at all costs, such that anytime somebody review my judgment, everybody will thump up and said he has done his best. Ethical standard is expected to guide us in that direction. When we begin to look for loopholes in any standard, we are to fall into that category. Survivor threat is part of the excuses, which is not acceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Osagie. So we'll round up with a question and her final word. As an experienced professional, with the current event happening in the accounting profession, do you think there's need to add to this fundamental principle or take out? What do you think?
Okay, thank you for that question. Based on my review, this is my personal opinion, and when the prof was taking us through the fundamental principle, when she was talking about confidentiality, in my own opinion, I feel that so many accountants hide under that confidentiality principle, because especially in my own opinion, professional accountants in business, that is people that are not in public practice, that don't provide assurance. So most people, like, you see something is going wrong as the accountant, as the CFO, you know that you people are not doing the right thing. You are not reporting correctly. Some standards are not being, disclosures are not correct according to the international financial reporting standards. But maybe under confidentiality, say, okay, I'm not supposed to expose things that are happening. You hide under that. So I'm not saying that it should be removed. It should not be removed, but there should be more explanation. People should understand the spirit of that principle. Because another thing, one thing about ethics, the fundamental principle, is that it's not rule-based, it's principle-based. And anything that is principle-based has to do with guidance. It provides guidance, and it needs you to use your judgment. So sometimes people tend to hide under that confidentiality. And I believe that it should be expanded more so that people will understand the intent, and people should look at the spirit of that principle. Then also, personally, I also want to add that I think that accountability should be added as one of our fundamental principles. The International Ethics Standard Board should consider adding that, because as accountants, we are always trying to keep account of what other people are doing, and we forget that we also should be accountable, because accountability means being answerable to someone else. So when you find yourself in the high level, as a managing partner or the partner in charge of the audit, as the CFO or the director of finance, you assume that you are not accountable. You just say, oh, do this. I'm the one telling you. So you mean you are kind of throwing away your accountability, which you are an accountant. So I believe it's an important principle that should be added, to the 5 fundamental principles, because accountability helps you to not only to take responsibility of the act, of the activity, but to take responsibility of the outcome of what you are doing. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll be looking at adding, hopefully we'll be able to communicate and see if we can add accountability to one of their principles. So because of time, we will now go on comfort break. So
Can I make a final comment if you don't mind?
okay.
30, I'll try and make it 30 seconds, but I just wanted to make a final note. As you know, when we have ethical problem, final stop for resolution. So, what I try to do and what I'll encourage people to do is to maybe ask yourself some of these questions. What would I tell my child or parent to do? So when you are faced with ethical problems, will you be proud to tell your child some of the things you've done? How will you feel after? How will you feel about yourself afterwards? Will you sleep well at night? Will my actions stand the test of time? Am I confident to justify my decisions? So these are questions you can ask yourself when you find yourself in a dilemma and there's an ethical problem, and there are no clear path for you to get away. So this could help sometimes to crystallize your course of action. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's take 5 minutes, and please, we'll be back in exactly 5 minutes. We have already overshot our time. Not